us to really demystify this entire argument is Natasha Hausdorff. She's a barrister. Thanks very much, Natasha, for speaking to us. Is Israel guilty of war crimes?
Well, thank you for having me. It's important to be clear that there is absolutely no truth whatsoever in these libels that are being propagated as part of Hamas strategy against Israel and its entirely lawful and legitimate response in accordance with the rules of war and the international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict. Plainly, Hamas's strategy here is, of course, to try and inflict as much pain as possible on Israelis, as we have seen with their barbaric brutality, but then to enlist the world to give them support and to parrot their propaganda, including the allegations that you have raised, in order to seek to restrain Israel's entirely lawful response. And it's vitally important that we recognize that the key principles of international humanitarian law, proportionality, necessity, and distinction, are always upheld by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. They were in previous operations, and even though the size of this operation is unprecedented, the ethical code of the IDF and the involvement of its lawyers, military lawyers, in approving the strikes and in approving operational decisions remains unchanged.
Now also, according to the convention, murder, torture, hostage-taking, humiliating and degrading treatment are banned. Also, war crimes like attacks on civilian settlements, humanitarian workers, destroying property where militarily is not necessary is also not allowed. Now, aren't these rules being violated, for example, in two cases? One, where a church was attacked. Second, where in the West Bank, a mosque was attacked. 4 people died in the second episode. And in the first attack, at least 3 dozen people are feared killed.
So the IDF has always been very clear that it does not target civilian or protected buildings, and objective assessments of the Army's activity in previous operations have confirmed this. When these schools, hospitals, and churches or mosques are being used by Hamas as sites from which to operate their terror infrastructure, so either as rocket launch sites or as storage for weapons or as command and control centers. And we know, and the international media even has reported, that the Shifa hospital in Gaza City serves as the Hamas command and control center. Under international law, when terrorists are hiding behind civilians and abusing the rules of war and committing real war crimes by using civilian and protected buildings for terrorist purposes, they lose their protection in international law. Nevertheless, Israel does not target these buildings where its proportionality analysis indicates that there will be excessive harm to civilians as a result of these strikes. So on every level of this equation, Israel is complying with the rules of armed conflict, while Hamas is exploiting them and also seeking to exploit public opinion and the coverage of this conflict. And that is something that every responsible individual around the world has a duty to stand up against. And media broadcasters in particular have a very important duty not to spread Hamas propaganda. The casualty figures that are being quoted coming out of Gaza, I must stress, come out of the Hamas-controlled health department, Ministry of Health in Gaza. They make no distinction between civilians and combatants. And as previous conflicts have shown time and time again, the numbers coming out of Hamas-controlled organizations cannot be trusted. What we have on the other side is an army that is made up of citizenry, that is accountable to a democratic state where NGOs hold the army and decisions that are made by the military to account in courts. On the one hand, we have the IDF and the information that they put out, and on the other hand, we have this absurd moral equivalence that is being drawn by with a genocidal terrorist organization. And the international media and people all over the world have a responsibility to stand up for the truth of this.